Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, once again, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What is going on indeed? Today, we're going to be talking all about The Last of Us. We are just hot off the finale, so we're going to kind of talk about that, as well as just kind of our general Last of Us thoughts as a whole. And that's pretty much all we have for this week. So it's just going to be a Last of Us spoiler casty kind of season 1 breakdown, our thoughts, all that stuff. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely go watch it. Highly recommended, I'm sure, from both of us. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Before we do, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So Cam, we literally finished it like 10 minutes ago, watched the after the show kind of recap, all that stuff. What were your thoughts on this final episode and the season as a whole?
I think my thoughts on the final episode was, oh wow, this was for all the other episodes to have been departures from the game, as far as because you don't want to do a 1-to-1. It doesn't make sense to do that. This was as close to 1-to-1 as I think they've done, as far as how the episode moves and how Joel and Ellie kind of move through the city. It feels, well, it's not, how do I put this? It's not, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Mm-hmm. But it definitely feels like Salt Lake City kind of gets the shaft in comparison to like the other places they've been. Because of the way that they move it moment to moment is kind of like, the way they move it moment to moment, not moment to moment, sorry, scene to scene, can sometimes be a little bit wonky. But that really comes down to they wanted to keep a primary scene in there that is in the games. That's a beautiful moment in the games. And they wanted to keep that in there as close to it as they possibly could. And I think the lead up to that and after that is perfect. They absolutely nail it on every front. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, they are both fantastic. Pedro Pascal as Joel is quintessential. Like they're both quite perfect for what they're doing. Joel is Pedro Pascal as Joel brings such a breadth and life to his character that isn't as I think when I think of Joel, I think of something more of a heavier like atmosphere around the character. And I think that the way that Pedro Pascal has done it is it feels more there's a much more of a sharpness to it, I guess. Not like there's an edge to it, like it's edgy, but in a way that everything Joel does in the show, that should have just been on silent. I don't think anybody heard the vibrations except me, but whatever.
I heard it, but also you called enough attention to it, so.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, I think when it comes down to Joel when he moves in the game, and like Joel from Troy Baker's kind of like the way that Troy Baker kind of does it is much more of a builds up momentum, and then towards the end there is kind of a train coming through type feeling, where Pedro Pascal's performance feels much more of a sharp, intentioned, direct way of not necessarily going through things, but going around them in a way that still goes through them in a weird kind of if you were to kind of compare it to, I guess you'd think of the way that Troy has portrayed Joel as much more of he builds up momentum through his performance as the layers come apart and he gets closer to Ellie, played by Ashley Johnson in the game. And the way that happens is, I think, perfect for a game. I don't know if it'd be perfect for the way that a show needs to go, because a show doesn't have the amount of lull time that you get in the game as you're going between obstacles and the way that you go through objectives in the game. That's not really, you're not able to accomplish that in a way that feels good or natural. And so the way that the direction, I think the way that they've done it in the show is much more of that. We are moving around. We're not focusing on the obstacles as something that Joel and Ellie need to get over, so much as the things they need to get over, they need to actually get more. I'm trying to put this in words, but I just feel like it's much more of a, I don't know. I'm just I'm just vomiting words at this point because I don't really know how I feel about it, more so than just saying I think that the performance by Pedro is much more agile in the way that, and I'm not talking about like physicality. I'm talking about like the way that they have approached scenes where Joel, played by Troy, feels like a force that when he's there, and a presence that when he's there, it's like a brick in hand. It's like there's a heavy gravitas and weight to it. Where Pedro, I feel, moves from dialogue to dialogue with a lot more gracefulness, and his actions feel a lot more great. I think that's the word I'm looking for. That Pedro plays Joel in a much more graceful, not delicate, but intentional manner, and it just might be because when you're playing Joel, when Troy's portraying him in the game, there is that level of video gameness about it. You are in control, so there needs to be a sort of weight and gravity to that maybe that definitely doesn't need to be on screen, and maybe that's how they approached it. Maybe that's how they kind of committed to it, but there is something very unique about those two performances that I think are such an interesting comparison to make them, and not in anything superficial or through dialogue or costume or appearance, but more so just absolute presence, whether it's in the game or on screen. Which is also interesting because that's actually a note I would say about Troy when he was playing the character in last episode.
James,
when he's playing James does have a sort of weight to him. And there's a sort of, and I think that's what helps call out him as being much more than just like a nameless character. Which is fast. Like, it is an interesting analysis of how that goes about. But I digress. Go ahead, Trevor. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, on that real quick, there was an interesting, like, listening to Troy talk about the last episode on, like, he went on Kind of Funny for their episode breakdown, and obviously they have the podcast. There was so much that he talked about that went into James that ends up on the cutting room floor and stuff. But it was like all of that intention still made James like that much more impactful and interesting of a character, even though we didn't see it. Like, enough of that was like there, and so it was really cool to just like hear that like behind the scenes element of it.
One thing about him in that episode, when they get back to the mess hall and you think, oh, they got the venison, they got the deer there and everything, and then you realize no, they didn't, and then you realize what it is, and you see everybody else is just chowing down because it's food, and you see James just delicately just like try to eat his meal. Yeah. And it's such a brilliant, well-intentioned way of doing it. Not just like absentmindedly eating. It's a careful, like he's careful about picking up the meat that's in it. There's a sort of like, I knew this person.
Yeah, they talk about the idea that like he doesn't want to eat it. And it's not until he kind of gets like a nonverbal order from David, eat your food, kind of that he does, like, because he talked in the like, you know, his appearances and stuff, he talked about the idea that like he's trying to keep that shred of humanity to him, and kind of like looking down a little bit on everybody else that's just like, you know, consuming and sure, they don't know what they're consuming, but like he does, and he doesn't want to be that, and it's not until like he succumbs from David that he, you know, does dive into it. But this episode, to what you were saying earlier, like this, I think hews so closely to the kind of the end little part, and really the only, at least the, like, from my mind, the only sequence we're really not getting in here is after the giraffe stuff. They go into the tunnels, and there's like a, you know, another swimming puzzle kind of thing that ends up getting them swept away, and that's what ends up, you know, knocking them unconscious and waking up in the hospital. We don't get that because that's gameplay. That's like everything they've really cut strongly has been gameplay stuff. And I love that, like, in cutting that, you know, instead they kind of short form it of, you know, some tear gas, you know, whatever to
flashbang,
the flashbang, to knock him out. But I love that, like, the additions that we get in this episode, not only the prologue with a wonderful Ashley Johnson cameo as the mother of Ellie, really bringing full circle there, was great. And filling in this backstory about that character's relationship with Marlene, about Ellie's relationship with Marlene, all of that stuff, and even kind of building in a explanation for why Ellie is immune, and the seeing the bite, basically, and the cordyceps sort of transitioned into Ellie there from birth. It's like a really interesting way to kind of justify why that character is special and what, how that happened, and it's such a rare enough thing that other people would not have necessarily encountered this or something.
How do you there's that issue of like Ellie was literally born, and right after she was born, still connected to the placenta, still like the transitive process of that ends up working out. Bella Ramsey, man, they are such a tour de force in this episode. It broke my heart seeing how shut down they were, as like when they're at the beginning of the episode, and just like how detached, and it made me feel so uncomfortable because I'd gotten used to this like rough but warm and wonderful character, and they were just able to perform Ellie as she is just dealing with a enormous amount of trauma, and they did it in such a fantastic way. I'm blown away by just like how incredible they are. I never would have imagined the feisty little bear girl from Game of Thrones would end up being this performer who could do such a level of depth to that character.
Yeah, to your other element of comparing like Pedro and Joel and Troy, like I have consistently found myself not really drawing comparisons between the two. Obviously, there are differences in the performances and all that stuff. I think so much of that is also just inherently Joel in the game isn't just Troy's performance. It is all like it's the animators, it's the designers, it's all that other stuff on top of it. So there already is like other things on top of Troy's performance. But for both Troy and Bella, Pedro and Bella, Troy and Ashley, like the thing I've consistently kind of thought about in this show is like they just nail these characters. Like these characters are the Joel and Ellie I know, and there are differences and there are different flavors and stuff, but they're still quintessentially like those characters. And I think that's like so it's been such a joy to watch. I know like Greg over at Kind of Funny has repeatedly kind of described it as like, it's two different theater troupes performing the same play or something like that.
That makes total sense. Yes, and that makes that fits into like my kind of like. I was frustrated putting it into words, and I apologize for that. But I will say that the way you nailed it was perfect. When you're talking about Troy's performance, there is, I guess, layers, and I don't mean that as in like the metaphorical sense. I mean literally, there are layers added onto that performance by animators and graphic artists and whatnot to that. I think add to that in a way. But I think that the way that my point still stands in how they approach things and the way that kind of like that approach was much more of a. And maybe it's just because it's the mediums, but I think that absolutely like nails it. And it is like two different troupes performing the same play. And yeah, no, I just fucking love it. And Marlene, we'll wait for a moment before we start talking about the actual content of the episode.
Yeah. Well, before diving into the Marlene of it all, the other scene that gets added in here that I really loved was the conversation with Joel saying like, I was the guy who missed.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. I was not expecting that.
Yeah. When like, obviously that got introduced in like episode 2 or 3 or something like that. It's, very early on, and it's like, oh, okay, much like Ellie, it's like, oh, that's a thing that probably happened, 10 years in or something like that.
I thought that was a call on how like somehow Joel survives in the video game, and that was like a call to that and making a joke out of that.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine the callback in this moment. When they said the scar, I was like,
yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, when he says it was me, like I immediately am like, oh, I love that choice, and I love that's like that we're getting this backstory, and it is like it's another element of this character that we don't see in the games, and it is like just the depth of the grief that he felt for Sarah, and it completely understandable. Girl died in his arms, shot, after like this horribly harrowing escape, you think they're going to be okay, and no, and that's all he had to live for. The world has fallen apart around him. He's got his brother, but like his world is Sarah. And so the fact that like that was the little extra element that they give to Joel in this version, and the scene between Pedro and Bella there, and another just powerhouse of the relationship, and hot on the heels of the giraffe scene, which like I've constantly kind of been wondering this season. I'm like, are they going to be able to translate the giraffe scene well into this medium? And from the beginning of the episode, where Ellie is so like distraught and distant and all that stuff, I was like, oh well, they clearly have to do something to snap her out of it, and that's obviously what the giraffe scene does in the game. So when we get into the like when he looks up the ladder, I'm like, oh yep, they're doing it spot on. Like, yep. she's gonna go up, she's gonna get distracted, dump the ladder down at him, and he's gonna chase after her. And like I loved how just beat for beat, like they kept all of that in there as well, so wonderfully. And so after this moment where like she has reawoken and opened back up to Joel, it's only fitting that Joel like returns the favor. And I love the bit there of like, well, I guess time heals all wounds. It wasn't time that did this.
It wasn't time that healed.
Yeah. Like the love between those two characters, even in this abbreviated format, because as playing the game, we get, much more time with these characters and much more little like banter, one-off and stuff like that. But it just does such a great job to cement that relationship into the hospital and show exactly why Joel's going to do the things Joel does.
Yeah, man, that is when they've avoided the kind of like the gameplay of The Last of Us being like, there's a lot of heavy, there's a lot of heavy shooting gameplay in the last half of that
Kansas City
game.
When like only one raider gets like killed, and it's like or a couple raiders, but like one guy gets a name or something like that.
In Boulder, the college.
No, that too. I'm going all the way back to Kansas City,
Got it, okay.
Which is like Pittsburgh in the game, and you killed
right. I see
eight people in that first fight or something like that. Like that being abbreviated down, and then like just kind of like the snowball effect of fewer and fewer people dying kind of thing. I was like, they're gonna probably go hard in this. I wasn't expecting it to be such a long montage over just music. Like it isn't. Like the movie version of this would have been action, Rambo, Die Hard, like chasing through, gunning down these people. And like we get the glimpses of that, but it's all through this like very melancholy, like Last of Us music. And we just, and it just keeps going. It's not the one guy that died at the university. It is like, okay, he kills these two people. Like there's one early on where like the guys, like, one guy starts just bolting and running down the hall, and then there's another guy like shooting at Joel from around the corner. I was fully expecting Joel to like hit that guy from around the corner and then take the guy who's running away out. He doesn't, but like
there's the guy, but right after that there's the guy who
the guy surrenders and Joel still shoots him anyway. And like
it's so good. The way that they do that is so great, because also Joel never has any expression on his face.
Yeah.
This is cold. This is absolutely like. And I think that it comes when I talk about that like the agility in which he approaches that scene in those scenes where he's doing that. It's not like you said. It's not like a Rambo. It's not like a Die Hard. It's not like a I'm under stress. I'm under fire. Oh, it's reaction. Like action, reaction.
I'm out of bullets. I'm picking up this gun. Yeah, I'm moving on to this gun's done. Well, here's a pistol I'm going to take. And yeah,
the way that they approach that and deal with that is so goddamn good. And it's because it's believable. It's for some reason out of nowhere, it feels believable.
Yeah. I like I think the most interesting element that you just kind of like sparked in my mind is the fact that his face is blank and you're not getting a reaction from, because you don't get a reaction from him in the game because it's you in the game doing this, and you're over his shoulder. You don't see what's on Joel's face as he's gunning down all these people. You're doing it, so it's whatever's on your face, really. And So I love that idea of like he like a switch has flipped, and like he is a man on a mission. His mission is to get to Ellie, and that's what he's gonna do. Like there's no room to focus or look at anything else. It's like he's basically heads down on that. And like even from the beginning of like, I don't have time for this, and just shoots the other guy. Or like
Yeah, because he's trying to do
like delivers a kill shot to the other guy.
He's trying to do an interrogation, and the guy's just like, you, and he goes, you know what? I just don't have time for this.
Yeah.
Pops him right in the head and keeps going. I was like, and from then on, Joel has nothing on his face.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And it's perfect because it's like, yeah, no, if you are this single-minded that you're willing to commit yourself to this. And I think Troy said it years ago and has continued to say it when they ask, how could Joel do that to the world? It's like that, like Ellie was his world. Like, I don't know what you want out of that. Like, he had become a father again, and you're asking him to, not even just asking him, you are telling him by your own free will, you need to walk away, which is the one thing he refused to do. When Sarah was born, he refused to walk away from being a father. He never did. And so now you're telling him, hey, walk away. Know that she's dying upstairs, but walk away. And it's like,
and even there, like the Marlene of it all, like I again, because of the prologue scene that we get, I love that she has that, like, I am the one person who understands this with you. Like, I promised her mother before I killed her that I would protect this girl, and now I'm sending her to her death for the greater good, kind of thing. And like, so trust me, I understand how hard this is.
Dude, I have such mixed, like, before I was like, I understand Marlene. I like Marlene.
Yeah.
I understand why she did what she did. Like, especially when you get in, and like, we're getting into the crux of things and spoilers, everybody. So if you haven't watched
this has been labeled spoilery from the beginning.
Cool. So from the get-go, like, I've always felt like I used to not feel bad about killing Marlene at all. And it wasn't until playing The Last of Us Part 2 where you really see Abby's dad, like play by play, like, gaslight and manipulate her into agreeing to the surgery. That I was like, because like he's like her dad, Matt. Like I've rewatched that scene plenty of times, and he does such a great job of breaking down Marlene's, like, her inner desire to save the world and gassing that up and gaslighting her on like a lot of things. The one thing that I will say, like, they definitely, like, I'm like, even worse now about the Fireflies and the Doctor as a whole, is she was conscious, and then they put her under to prevent, and they weren't going to tell her.
Yeah, that's
which, like, before it was like, well, she was knocked out, and they were just keeping her, and they decided to keep her under so that she doesn't, like, I'm like,
yeah, it's very much like there are no good people here.
None.
But it like
this doctor fucking sucks. He's a shitty doctor. First off, do no harm. Second off, like, get consent from your patients. You, like, I'm like, when he just like, Joel, I'm not gonna let you do this.
Yeah,
pop. Like,
the Hippocratic Oath is a luxury in a post-apocalyptic world. There, Cam.
I get it. I get it.
But I do.
But don't be telling me this is a fucking good guy.
No. I appreciate that. It, like, they do kind of like throw a nod to that in terms of like we didn't want to scare her. We didn't, like, we hid this from her, thinking this is what's best for her. It's not, and it's clearly terrible. And yeah, it does add just another layer of gray to all of this. One of the things I loved, knowing where the story goes from part 2, is that it still maintained the same, like, this guy's just a guy kind of thing. Like, they could have like thrown a scene there, kind of like doing place setting for Abby and her dad and whatnot. We don't get that. We just get, like, largely from Joel's perspective. He walks in, this guy is going to do the surgery, and Joel shoots him to stop the surgery from happening.
Well, I mean, like, once again, it gets to the point. This guy walked in with a gun, says, hey, like, unhook her. And the doctor goes immediately, fuck you, I'm going to save the world. And pulls the scalpel out on him. And, like, don't get me wrong. Like,
I mean, he doesn't do that, but also, yeah, a scalpel versus a gun, it's really no contest. And Joel just pops him right in the head.
Yeah. Like, No, you're right. He didn't say I'm not gonna let you fuck over the world. That's right.
Yeah, basically, like I can't let you do this.
Like I can't let you do this,
the
and
line,
then takes a scalpel and threatens Joel with it, and it's like, and Joel's just gone.
Mhm.
He's gone.
Which
in this
is
moment.
like, I do appreciate even that's like a nod to, if you hesitate in the game, that's what's going to happen, and then he comes and lunges at you. Because if you don't want to make that choice, that the game basically is making you make.
Yep.
So I appreciate that it wasn't just Joel comes in and shoots the guy outright, like many players do, I'm sure.
Well, I would also ask you, because I was like, in the game you can also like,
oh yeah, you can kill everybody in that
you
scene,
can murder the nurses too.
Yeah.
But I never did. But I've seen people be like, go in and just go guns blazing, pop, 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 pop.
Mm-hmm. A shout out to, again, I didn't see this in the episode, but per Twitter afterwards, Laura Bailey, who plays Abby in part 2, was one of the nurses in that scene, apparently. So shout out to that little cameo as well.
Definitely.
Though I do hope, like, given the prominence of her character, I hope she gets a little bit more of the Troy and Ashley Johnson treatment with something else in season 2 and or 3 or whatever.
I'm so fascinated who they could cast as Abby. Because Abby's such a different kind of character. Like I think they did a great job of Bella to Ellie. But when you talk about like the physicality that Abby brings to the table in part 2, I know there's definitely actresses out there. I know that, and I'm not talking about body type. I'm talking about like asking for that level of physical presence that Abby constantly has. Like,
yeah, there have been rumors, because there's an actress and or model who has a very Abby like look and kind of like a body build and stuff like that. That is like her Instagram is followed specifically by like Neil Druckmann and HBO, I think. So like there were rumors early on in the season that maybe she'd already been cast, and maybe we would see her in this episode or something like that set up.
That might have been on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Apparently, we know that they shoot a bunch of stuff that ends up just not making it into the episode, which I can't wait if we're like deleted scenes and stuff to make.
Or it'll be reused in season 2.
Well, I'm talking about like Troy stuff.
Yeah.
Like Troy stuff. I'm fascinated to get more of that. Like, because man, fucking David's like so much scarier in the show than he is in the game.
I like, again, going to, they for the most part cut out gameplay stuff, and so the fact that like the gameplay of the hospital there at the end was like a greatest hits, a speed run of the gameplay section, basically. And just like seeing so much more violence than like we've seen over the course of the entire rest of the run, I think that choice is a very fun and interesting choice in the context of they held back everywhere else so that this would be that much more impactful and that much more powerful. And I love, just again, to speaking to how Pedro and Bella are just nail the essence of these characters, the innate like Joel and Ellie-ness that I think of, like the post hospital scene of like them both in the car and then walking in Wyoming, just nailed it, continued to nail it. On the Marlene front again, I loved that it's framed pretty much like it is in the game, where like Marlene confronts Joel and then we cut to the car, and then while we're in the car we see the gunshot, and
you and I both were just like, because
when we cut away from Marlene and went to the car, we were both like, yes, nailed it, great.
I straight up did like a chef's kiss, just like mwah, like perfect, like completely perfect, just like nailed it. Thank you. Because you and I were both worried that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. But yeah, then we get that, like, as Joel is fabricating this whole story for Ellie, I love that we get the gunshot in there, and then see kind of like that it wasn't just that. It was, again, just like in the game, like, please, you don't have to kill me. you'd only come after her and pop.
Just like that efficiency, the efficiency of that is just so goddamn good. I fucking love it. I fucking loved everything about it. It made me so much more excited about, because I think one of the best things that, one of the most interesting things that the game does that the show doesn't do, but the game like definitively does because you spend so much more time in the game, is it pulls a prestige on you where you get like the initiation where you're like, oh, Joel's like a shattered, hurt old man who's now like calloused over and is an asshole. You get the turn where you're like, oh, he's opening up to Ellie. Oh, well, yeah, but you also that it makes you forget in the first level of The Last of Us, or sorry, the second level of The Last of Us Part 1, you are literally hunting down a guy who screwed you out of money. They make it about like, we need the battery to get to Tommy to rescue Tommy in the show. In the game, it's all about, hey, this guy fucked us, we're gonna go fuck him up. And Joel is brutal at executing that. And nobody's afraid of Tess, they're afraid of Joel. And,
I mean, in the game, Tess is the one who ends Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you playing as Joel, obviously, like, get her there, but like it is also how ruthless Tess is.
Oh, 100%. Tess is no angel. I wasn't saying that. Yeah. But there's a sheer brutality to Joel that in the game, because you're caring about Ellie so much and you're taking care of her, the violence that you do is in your mind justified as, I'm protecting this girl.
Mm-hmm. And
the turnabout is you all but become the abductor. And at the end of the game, not in like a creepy sort of sense, but in a way that like you take Ellie away from her goal, and her what she believes her purpose is, and it goes like very deep around that. But that is the prestige, is that you have forgotten that Joel is an incredibly violent man who is willing to go and do things that are not like that are deeply morally questionable. And also, we've been told this entire time that the Fireflies are freedom fighters, and there's a lot of like this buildup that we aren't expecting a confrontation between Joel and the Fireflies at the end.
Yeah,
and that's intentional. It's brilliantly done. There's not that as much in this, but
yeah, Fedra as a whole is less of an antagonist in this because, I mean, even going back to the second episode or whatever, when it's Infected that come into the State House instead of Fedra. We just don't get a lot of, like, we see, or we hear from like the Kansas City subplot of like Fedra sucked and ruined that people. And it like,
I heard Fedra sucked, but I heard in Kansas City, oh yeah, you heard right. They were the worst.
Yeah. Like even to that, like as they're marching Joel down the stairs, I found myself thinking about like the Kansas City stuff and what like Craig and Neil kind of had touched on of like, when a new force comes into power, they're often just as bad as the old force. And like, yep, that was basically what we were seeing from the Fireflies there.
When Marlene says, and then we're going to give it to everyone, my first thought was bullshit. Because there's no way, because after what we've seen with Kansas City, what we've seen happen, the only time that like this like post-world stuff works is you break down the social hierarchy and you put basically everybody on the same level. And that's what you got in Jackson. Right? Like when they're like, so are you in charge? And she goes, no, I'm democratic elected as part of a council. Like we don't have leaders. And the way that they approach that, and it's like one of the best goddamn lines in the entire show. But there's that level. So when you are trying to enforce this hierarchy, like you get in Kansas City, like you get with Fedra, like you get with the Fireflies, you have this hierarchy that is just as bad as what they're replacing.
I mean, I still like to give Marlene the benefit of the doubt.
Marlene for sure.
That like like if they get a cure for this, yeah, of course they want to give that to everybody. Why would they withhold the cure from people? Because like it's just going to like that would be a level of cruelty that nothing the Fireflies have done supports, I guess. So I believe that the intent would be to give the cure for everybody. I mean, the same way, like, you know, they cure cancer or, you know, something like that. Like the powers that be yes, there will be like an elite that gets it probably first, but they'll still do whatever they can to cure cancer for everybody and make it go away.
I don't like, especially with the world like The Last of Us, I don't bet on it, especially because, like we said, give Marlene the benefit of the doubt. Marlene literally is there saying, I get it, Joel. I'm still sending this girl to her death.
Yeah. I mean, again, for like the idea of for the greater good, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, all that. Like that's what's at play there.
Sure. But that is also like, there is a level of, and it goes back to, and this is like part of a spoiler of Last of Us Part 2, but it goes into when he says, when Abby's dad, the final nail in the coffin that I'll always harken back to is he tells Marlene that doing this to Ellie will justify all the things that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'm like when she's still willing to let that happen, it's because she believes she's a good person, not a good person, but like she's in the right about this, that it's for the benefit of the world. It doesn't matter how it makes her feel. And it goes to that moment of she needs to justify it. What it is determined upon the subject that we're talking about. But the justification for letting Ellie die is we're going to cure everyone. But how likely is that when we've seen the issues of power structures, we've seen the issues of everything we've seen about the world up to this point does not tell me the Fireflies are are going to be able to accomplish giving it to everybody, or maybe even want to. Because I think the idea that the Fireflies are because Marlene is our central Firefly figure,
mm-hmm.
and because she is that kind of a person, there is a base assumption that the Fireflies as a whole within their goal and everything is the same. And based upon everything we've seen going further on and on and on, especially because, and I think this might hint at a clue about it, is the leader of the Kansas City Resistance gets betrayed, tells his sister, do forgiveness. And she chooses not to.
Mm-hmm.
Because Marlene wants to give it to everybody doesn't tell me that the Fireflies aren't. Do you think the Fireflies are going to give it to Fedra officers?
Yes, I do. I think it is it's a weird, it's a debate we could have for eternity. But yes, I do believe that this would bring hope back into a world that does not have hope. And so I think it would, everybody would try and work together to bring the world back to some sense of normalcy, including allying with Fedra and what happens after that, and how do you have raiders pay for the crimes they've committed and all that stuff. That ends up being okay, what is the New World Order? But at least you're not having to worry about these infected just constantly consuming people anymore. So I think in the same way that you have sci-fi stories that aliens invade and the whole world comes back together to fight off the common cause or something like that. I think that's the kind of story I would envision if they were able to find a cure. But it's also, who knows if it would work, and you could go down any number of rabbit holes as to all of that other stuff. But that's where I come from in that is I do think that the intent is we think we think we are believing so deeply in this thing. It is a religion of sorts. We believe this is the thing that will pull us out of this. So we're putting all of our stock into this. And if that means that this girl has to die, this girl who I saw, pretty much come into this world has to die, that's terrible. And I'm going to have to live with that every day. But I'm still trying to justify it because of I'm still trying to weigh how many people we can conceivably help with this if things go well. It's and I even that is I love the story in general because it opens up this kind of debate and leaves it all open ended. You don't know if Ellie dies and they
does it even work?
Does it even work? Yeah, who knows what's to say.
One of my favorite things about it is they're oh yeah, they build up as leading virologist, and it's but in the back of my head I've always been but it's fungi, it's not a virus, it's fungi, it's fungus.
Yeah.
spores and stuff. It doesn't like. That's not how it works. A virologist, I don't know how a virologist outside of basic biological knowledge and maybe some advanced like labs and stuff maybe he did in med school would have like an understanding of like the deep necessariness that you need for fungus because yeah, I don't know. Like we get into those like what ifs and honestly that's not what the story's about.
Yeah.
Like the first thing, I think it harkens back to one of my favorite quotes ever by Stan Lee whenever he was asked like who would win in a fight, this person, whoever the author wants to win.
Yeah.
Would Abby's father have the knowledge necessary to cure the world?
If you wanted that to be the end of the story, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
if Neil and in the show Craig, if they wanted that to be the case, then yeah, he could have. Like he's the one person in the world who could have saved it. And that's it. Like, and it's like, all right, you're the authors. I don't get it, but okay. But I also want to say, fucking, I nailed it. I nailed the idea that like, at some point when she was infected, she somehow became symbiotic with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yes, because that's the only way this ends up making sense and working. But the thing about it is symbiosis, like on that level, I don't know how you replicate it. Because it's not just like you can clone spores.
That's what they kind of touch on is that they're basically trying to replicate the receptors that symbiosis has like led to that like tricks the cordyceps into not attacking.
But the cordyceps still attack her.
No, they don't.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the infected attack her and stuff, but like once she's bit, the cordyceps doesn't like infect her brain.
The carrier still will attack.
Yeah. Basically, like you'd still have to deal with all the infected. There's no like wiping that away, but you wouldn't get more infected.
You find a cure for the infection, but not the infected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I like this was just such a great season and like such a great translation. And I think like it definitely had the benefit of the original story is already so cinematic and so episodic as like was really like increasingly evident over the course of the series where we could basically be like, all right, this episode is going to be this beat, and like kind of just you could pace out the entire season from episode 1. And I loved how well they were able to really effectively translate all that. And I can't like knowing like so much of this, the last few episodes has made me like want to hop back in and play Last of Us Part 2 again to just kind of like remember where the story goes from here and kind of like enjoy elements of that.
I want to play the first half of Last of Us Part 2.
All right, that's fine. I mean, I think you're missing out on half of a really interesting and compelling story, but that's
you're right.
Fine. And I'll be curious how the show continues to adapt that story as well.
God,
I very much like one of the big gripes I've had with Last of Us Part 2 is its pacing is way too long and it is basically 2 games in one. So I think we're probably going to get seasons 2 and 3 out of Last of Us Part 2. And I think that'll be it. I think much like so many Game of Thrones moments, I think there's a lot of potential for big, like, holy fuck, they really did that kind of things in season 2 and then again in season 3 for people who aren't fans of the game and don't know what's coming and all that stuff. And I can't wait to see, like, the show has given me every bit of faith that they will continue to expertly nail like the translation and, you know, when to deviate and make different choices and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I'm so excited for where we go from here and how they will continue to tell that story in terms of like, obviously one of the things that was like so cool and so refreshing to see in this was their use of flashbacks and whether it was flashbacks that had already existed or flashbacks that were brand new to this version of the story. They pretty much always like the only thing I can look at and say like, I didn't really like that choice was the like fungal kiss at the end of episode 2. I'm like, I like hearing them talk about it. I get why they did it. I still don't like it. And it doesn't like it just adds this extra layer of creepy that I don't think is needed. I think it's already a harrowing enough situation that you didn't need to have this weird like zombie fungus making out with Tess to
that still haunts me.
Consume the transition or what like that's just a weird thing, especially since like we don't ever see that part of it again or anything like that. So, yeah, it's just like that's in 9 episodes. That's the only thing I'm like, I didn't really like that.
Could have lived my entire life without seeing that.
Then immediately, like after that, we got the Bill and Frank episode, which was like a huge departure and so incredible and such a wonderful way to tell thematically the same story in the same moments. But you know, Bill's Town in the game, excuse me, is all about introducing traps and stuff. And we really need to see that. So we get this wonderful story instead.
Also, it sucks. Bill's Town in the game sucks. I stand by that.
I think you're a fucking moron for that. But like,
no. Like the narrative stuff in like with Bill is fun.
I mean, no, I enjoy the gameplay stuff too. I think because it is it's one of the first like challenges of the game. And you can't just rely on sneaking through and stuff like that. There is so many infected that you're going to get overwhelmed. You have to kind of like play through that and stuff. So I enjoy Bill's Town. But also I usually just craft a whole bunch of Molotovs, and like if you throw a Molotov at some infected, the one you hit lights on fire, screams, draws the other ones to them. They light on fire and scream, and like you continue that cycle going. So you can take out a lot of infected with a single Molotov. So I think you just need to play the game better, Cameron. But anyway, it still is like so much like the way they were able to turn that story on its head, and like adding the element of making Sam deaf, just further like made that character compelling. Even like the little nods to Ish, like there's clearly such a love, and they talk about this a lot in the podcasts and in the like behind the scenes stuff of like so many of the people that worked on the show in like a behind the scenes capacity were so excited to work on the show because they were such fans of the game. And I think that comes through in pretty much every frame. I think it's such a wonderful adaptation of that story, and I can't wait to see where they go from here. And yeah, it's just gonna be a good time, and it's going to break our hearts a lot more. So there's that to look forward to.
I really wish your voice had like started breaking down at a more emotional part of when we were talking about stuff and not over like gameplay and me not liking Bill's Town.
Yeah.
Because that would have been like, for audio listeners, that would have been an incredible moment where they're like, wow, Trevor's really breaking down on this. Like it's really getting to him.
Sure. Meanwhile, I would have appreciated you jumping in, realizing I was struggling and couldn't get words out.
I was going to be talking about Bill's Town, but then immediately you shut me down, being like, "You're just bad at the game, Cameron." It's like, okay.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on the show before we wrap up?
Yeah, no. My final thoughts on the show are: it's fantastic. It's absolutely unbelievable how brilliant they got that. And they got the game. They got the game on an intrinsic level. They absolutely deliver on it in every fathomable way possible. We all could have gone without that test scene at the end of episode 2. No one needed that. If you say you needed that, you didn't, and you should look for help because that's what leads you to think that you need it. Gosh, that's such a creepy moment. It's still like I still get like wigglies in my throat thinking about it. Right now, I think overall, just like in episode 3 being like beyond fantastic, one of the best episodes of television ever. These two masterclass actors absolutely delivering a love story for the ages. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Overall, the show, it's an absolute 10 out of 10. Watch it. If you've watched it and you're like, wow, I really like it, play the games. If you play the games and you're like, I don't know why you're listening to this if you haven't watched the show, but play it, watch the show. They are such great companion pieces. One does not take away from the other on any level, and I think that this is a fantastic, it's a fantastic time to be a Last of Us fan, much less a Last of Us diehard, but like I know many of our friends and listeners are. So.
Yeah. In particular, I'll be very curious, because Logan, favorite game of all time, still has not watched as of this recording, as far as I know. I don't imagine he finally started watching the show tonight. So we'll see what he thinks eventually, maybe. Or maybe much like, Last of Us Part 2, maybe he'll just never get around to it. Who knows? But yeah, that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to watch, pretty most of these episodes. I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 we didn't watch together.
Bill and Frank we didn't watch together.
Yeah, that's right.
Bill and Frank, we didn't watch together. You watched it because I was not able to get home in time.
Yeah, I think you were with family that night or something.
I was with family pretty late into the evening too. And so like, yeah, no. And then you're like, yeah, you should watch it. And I'm just like, okay. And I watched it. I'm glad we didn't watch it together.
Yeah,
because I fucking ugly cried my ass off. Holy shit, I cried so hard.
You would have been a big old mess. But yes, let's go around the metaphorical table, which actually isn't even necessarily a metaphorical table anymore, because we do have like, I mean, we're still on two different desks, but we are like right here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
at one point I had to like drop the screen down so we could like actually see each other like face to face, because like like this is a real conversation we're having. We need to have it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But yes, let's go around the table with any plugs. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, if you're listening to this episode, look forward to this Wednesday. We're going to be putting out another episode of Jedi Fallen Order, which is the Let's Play series we announced last week that I've been doing. Have the first few in the can, and yeah, looking forward to be putting more of that out there. And I hope you guys are all enjoying that. In my mind, everyone's really enjoying it. The episode hasn't come out yet, but still.
No, the first one's out. Yes, you follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. In addition to Cam's Jedi Fallen Order Let's Play, you can also catch our continued Elden Ring ones for as long as those keep happening. If Cameron decides to head down a pool of just terrible, annoying bullshit boss fights again, who knows how much longer that series will go. But you can do that on Tuesdays. You can do my Breath of the Wild replay series on Thursdays. And then also catch out that D Plus show, which we're doing Pirates of the Caribbean all month long. We did Curse of the Black Pearl last week. We will continue on with Dead Man's Chest this week, which Cameron and I also watched today. So it was a wild swing of quality in content that we've enjoyed today. So yeah, stay tuned for that on that D Plus show. And yeah, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you like what you heard, please remember to rate, like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.